Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Real United States. I'm your host, Paul Campbell, and behind the camera, as always, is our camera operator and my wife, Beverly Campbell. Welcome to Greenbelt, Maryland. Now, we brought you to Greenbelt because it is an interesting community in the fact that it was built essentially as one entire community at once. I mean, it was built over time, but the vast majority of it was built all at once. There are three communities in the United States that have a common link. Greenbelt, Maryland, Green Hills in Ohio near Cincinnati, and Greendale in Wisconsin near Milwaukee. Now, what makes these three communities different from other communities in the United States is they were built in the mid-1930s when President Roosevelt created the Resettlement Administration in 1935. In the 1930s in the United States was the Depression. It was the economic downturn that was the worst it's ever been in the history of the United States. It affected actually much of the world, but certainly here in the United States there was huge unemployment. And in order to jumpstart the economy and to provide housing, low-income housing, affordable housing for low-income families, that is, the Resettlement Administration came in and, in this particular case, built the entire community of Greenbelt. You'll notice a lot of these houses are townhouses in this part of the community we're just coming into. This was a relatively inexpensive way to build housing at the time that would provide jobs for unemployed workers and give them income and affordable housing at the end of that. So it was a two-prong, or two birds with one stone, to use a cliche, sort of an effort. You gave people jobs so they had income, and you gave them affordable housing so they had places to live. Now, Greenbelt is about 10 or 15 miles outside of Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, and largely served as what we would call in the United States a bedroom community to Washington, D.C., certainly at the time and even today. Although many of the people that live here now work in the surrounding areas as well. So Greenbelt was an experiment at the time, and it's endured to this day. It was started about in 1936, 1937 is what the placard at the opening of the video says. So depending on which resource you read. And it was built, over a number of years. And in fact, as we get through this community, you're going to see that there are housing architectural styles that were built actually decades later as the community continued to grow. Much of this community is now privately owned. It was built originally as a cooperative. People would buy shares in a cooperative, and then they own the assets of the cooperative. In 1952, however, the government sold the entire community, and individual owners then purchased the homes and many of the businesses. Now, some of these are still, to this day, owned by a cooperative, but largely most of what is here in Greenbelt is, in fact, privately owned. Now, I'd like to apologize for the fact that it looks like I'm driving about 60 miles an hour through a residential community. That is a trick of the lens. We got a new GoPro camera over the Christmas holidays, which is mounted to our windshield and is a very wide-angle lens. And in fact, I'm only doing about 25 to 30 miles an hour. So I am not, in fact, screaming through this quiet little residential area. Here on the right, you see, is the school, the local, I think that's the elementary school that serves this community. And again, some of the houses you'll start to see here somewhere that they're individual houses and not the townhome style, and that will progressively become the case as we get further around. This is actually a big loop that we're going all the way around, and we'll come back out where we came in. See 25-mile-an-hour speed limit there. Now you'll notice that there is, quite a bit of, woods. There are a lot of trees here. In an individual home here on the right. And here on the right, you'll see this is a playground. It's not actually a park, it's a playground with a big field next to it. And there's one of these about every half mile through the whole community. I didn't actually clock the distance, but there are an enormous number of them. And this was all part of the planning of the original community to provide a place for the kids to play and to gather and to socialize, although at the time socialization was probably a little bit different than it is with the advent of social media and computers and everything today. This large tank here is outside of the community. I'm driving around the perimeter of the community, and that's an industrial storage tank. I'm not sure for what. Now these homes, I wanted to point out, you'll notice that these are bi-level and tri-level homes. This was an architectural style that was common in the United States in the very late 1960s and through the 1970s. So many of these you'll see are individual homes versus the townhomes we were looking at earlier. These, in fact, were probably built in the 1970s. This is further back on the far side of the Greenbelt community. And it's pretty unmistakable that these homes were built decades after the original townhomes, but still part of this whole experiment in building reasonable income housing. Going down a bit of a hill here. It's a nice rolling area here in southern Maryland. Difficult to shoot outdoor footage in the wintertime, of course. We got lucky. We got good light this day. See a little tree house here on the right that somebody's built. Like I said, there's a lot of trees here, and another one of these playgrounds that I said is about every half mile throughout the entire community. And this was all part of the public property of the community, with some swings and slides and whatnot for the kids, and then a large open field for them to play baseball, football, soccer, whatever they happen to be interested in at the time. I got here, I didn't really know which way to go. I got lucky and just kept turning left, so I stayed in the loop. This woods is outside. We're driving in the periphery of the community, but it gives it a nice kind of a rural feel, because Greenbelt is actually surrounded on all sides by other city. A lot of commercial, industrial development, other residential areas. But this is not a small town out in the middle of the country. This is actually a community in a very highly, densely populated part of the United States. So all this trees in this along here that have been preserved give it a very nice sort of small town rural feel, even though you are only a mile from a very metropolitan area. As we pass through here, you're going to notice not only that there's schools, there's churches. We're going to come to a synagogue here in a little bit. All of the things that a community would want in their community. But again, it looks like a very rural area. If you look at this on Google Maps, you'll see that it's right in the heart of a highly populated area. Some of this housing, of course, is apartment housing. You'll notice that they're not all individual homes. Very, very quiet little community, actually. A lot of on-street parking. Parking throughout the Washington, D.C. greater metropolitan area is actually at a premium. A lot of apartments here, and obviously where you have a high density of people living, parking becomes difficult because everyone owns a car here in the United States, just about. I mean, certainly in some of the very large cities, people don't own cars. The gas station here might be one of the businesses that is still owned by cooperative. There's a shopping center. We didn't do an excellent job of showing it, but here on the right, which is the original shopping center, as I understand it, that was built at the time that the entire community was built. The local theater, I understand, is still owned by cooperative. And here down this street to the right is actually where the Greenbelt Community Center is. It's not these buildings you're looking at, it's down that street. Open 7 days a week. It's a place where people can get together and have activities, socialize, whatever they want to do. Also part of the original planning and building of the community here, the Greenbelt Public Library. Now, most people today still use internet, but it is nice to be able to have access to books and the facilities of a local public library. Public library is still very popular here in the United States. You can see we did have some snow recently, not a great deal for the middle of January, but it's certainly been cold enough to have a little bit of snow. And you'll notice again the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit through this entire community, because there are a lot of families, a lot of children, people crossing the street. You may notice through this, some of the buildings have flat roofs and some have pitched roofs. I'm not quite certain why they chose one style over the other. I mean, pitched roofs are very common here in the northern part of the country, to help keep snow off the roofs, but you will notice that some of these older buildings built in the 1930s have flat roofs, probably because it was a less expensive building style when they were building these. A lot of them built very close to the street, making parking even more difficult. Here, as I had mentioned, on the right is the local synagogue. I don't know how common it is in all parts of the world. Certainly in numerous parts of the world, it's not uncommon for having people of many different faiths and beliefs and whatnot to live in harmony in a community like this. Again, more of these roofs that are flat roofs in these row houses or these townhomes. And that is essentially the full loop here. We're coming back around onto the main street that we turned off of originally, back to head back out towards the main part of town. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us here on the Real United States and this tour of Greenbelt, Maryland. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't already, pick subscribe and join us for future episodes. If you got questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below. And as always, thank you for watching.